Washington Street, East Shaw Supermarket, for a male possible overdose. 653.
41st Avenue, near Oliver Street. Ground for sick person, Dr. 109, channel 812 response.
The first time I ever experienced adrenaline and realized it, I was shivering in the jump seat of an ambulance at 2 in the morning. We'd been dispatched to agonal breathing. That means that the lizard brain, the most basic part of us, is taken over and it's attempting to breathe, simply because it's all it knows how to do. Like someone on the end of a radio speaking to an empty channel, there is only static in response to each signal. My fight-or-flight system has released a surge of epinephrine. And though I am cold and my teeth chatter, sweat sticks to my shirt, I'm as pale as the image of the faceless patient strewn on the floor and breathing in ataxia. I know that when I kneel down to feel for a pulse, there will be nothing. And I practice breathing as I've been taught. In for 4, hold for 4, and out for 4. I clench my core to try and grab at my vagus nerve, counteract my fight-or-flight response. It is safe to say that at this time I was and still am an innocent child in the world of emergency services. As a passerby that at one time briefly slowed down and rubbernecked out of curiosity, staring at all the pretty blue and red lights giving a campfire glow to a highway collision, my memories of past bubble to the surface. The box that surrounds me becomes dark as I am no longer in the ambulance but my own thoughts. The first time I ever had to do CPR was in the relative safety of the hospital. There I went about practicing my skills under the watchful eye of nurses and doctors. The sound of a phone being picked up or a radio port from an incoming ambulance is the only warning. You quick walk or jog away, and before you know it, a group of people will gather. They all know what to do. Everyone has a job. Intubation and ventilation, an IV here, a warming blanket to help blood circulate, drying up X and Y medicine, placing electrodes and shock pads here and there. Everyone else without a role forms a line. One person steps up to the bed, stands over the person, and begins compressions at least 2 inches deep, about 100 to 120 beats per minute. Roughly the same beat as Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. In the moment of compressions, you're entirely focused, keeping count, brought out by the focus when you realize you've been holding your breath and your core muscles are burnt. It's like pushing into a sandbag filled with rubber. When tired, you announce it, step off, and the next person takes over. And you rejoin the line, and the cycle continues. The mechanical nature of this process seems to ease the fear of the situation for me. Most of the time we are detached from the person. We do not know who they are, nor the families and friends they may have or know. I went over, whether stressful or unsuccessful. Everyone is thanked. Sometimes there will be a moment to speak and de-stress, but after, the hospital has to go on. There are, after all, many other patients that need to be taken care of, some urgently so, and in a way, the act of doing compressions and breathing for the patient is calming because you're doing something. Calming because your training can take over and the conscious part of you can unfocus if you let it. Calming because you don't have to wait and you aren't left to wander or to your own thoughts. I found that for me there was no time to really think about a patient passing away or being brought back. There was always something else to move on to. I did not have to wait and sit alone with my thoughts. And even after my shift and I go home, the process of having been so busy allowed me to put those memories in a box without thinking. wasn't until back in the jump seat traveling down the road those memories came out of that box and into the wider one. I had no choice but to face them then and there, and 5 people joined me and were quiet as we traveled. 4 of them are in their late lives, skin wrinkled from a life lived, cardiac arrest from old hearts and chronic conditions. But one of them is no more than 5 or so years older than I, and is speculated suicide by overdose. They aren't judgmental of me or anyone else, just there. I'm faced with the fact that one day the roles will be reversed and it will be me sitting quiet with some medic in the jump seat. This was not the time for an existential crisis. We arrived to find the box of a fire truck already parked before the door of a 2-story house in a spacious and clean neighborhood. Well-cut lawns, litterless streets, and polished cars. I pile everything on top of the gurney, truck box, monitor, airway bag all in tow. I enter the front door slow and find an empty living room, well kept, and a thin flight of stairs upward. And that's all I notice. Call out and hear a voice come from upstairs. A brief snide thought tries to calm me down. Of course it's upstairs. It's never in a wide open space on level, soft ground where we can get in and out easily. And another thought replaces that one as it passes. It's quiet. There is a sound to CPR. Up close, it's the sound of crackling bones and your own muffled counting. Instead, there is only the rattle of all that equipment on my gurney now strapped to my arms and shoulders and trudging up the stairs. As I near the top, fear and anxiety, a shiver in my spine come to a momentary peak before it disappears. And I am greeted by a squad of firefighters, the patient's wife, and in a wide bed a man is snoring. Snoring in an even, rhythmic pattern with full, visible chest rise and fall. I have never been happier to hear snoring. I find so much relief that I'm paralyzed and have no idea what to do, the same way I'd have no idea what to do if I had been paralyzed by fear. This did not culminate into running a code, as we call it. As often does happen, what we were dispatched to turned out to be something different, such as the nature of often panic communication over the phone. This was, however, the first time I'd ever had to wait for a code. No action, just inaction and thought. It was the first time those memories in the ER were unboxed and the lid was broken. And I had to face not necessarily them, but my own mortality. I admit both the fear and relief I felt was selfish. I was more relieved and more afraid for myself. And that long 2 to 5 minute ride is a kind of experience we will all have. Some of us multiple times, some of us will have a worse ride, some relatively easier. The only real similarity between all of our rides and the experiences in them is that we will have no choice but to confront whatever is sitting next to us and whatever will be at the end of it. And what choice we do have is what we let that do to us. Just as it was painful to get to that house, the relief at the end, finding life when I thought there would only be death, is much like how amazing it is to take a simple breath and recognize life itself. What we experience in our rides will from day to day attempt to stifle our ability to breathe. It's the day we feel horrible, it's the times we feel fear or sorrow. I have found that the same way I breathed in the back of the ambulance for the time being is a choice I can make, and that if I do not make it, although the lizard brain part of my body will force my diaphragm to contract and my lungs to expand, it won't mean much. And whatever weighs me down or frightens me will become worse. That realization that for the time being I can choose to breathe and I can choose to recognize it no matter what weight is on my back or what fear plagues me, has allowed me to live with my ride and my experiences. Painfully at first and at times even now, but not a pain that lasts forever. And I can choose to live with my ride, not in a snarky, get over it kind of a way, but live with it like it's a neighbor. That's something we can all do. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. We'll all have times when we forget to breathe, or when we can't seem to make that choice. Sometimes only for a moment, others for weeks or perhaps years. But every second is a new chance to make that choice and live. And if you remember, in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and out for 4 seconds. That's at least 12 that you're making that choice. Then at least you're making that choice for 12 seconds instead of just one. Maybe you could do it again for another 12 and another 12, and on and on.
Delta 1 passed out box 303516. Rep 20 1 14 Medicaid 12 responding 1751. Engine 811 responding. 811. Ambulance 812 responding.
Ambulance 812.
Big local 6000 Greenbelt Road, Beltway Plaza Shopping Center. Delta trouble breathing box area 1412.